Welcome back to another week of Feathers and Field Goals. What a Saturday inside Delaware Stadium. The kind of game fans will be talking about for years. An 85-point thriller, overtime drama, and the program's first ever FBS win against an FBS opponent. Delaware outlasted UConn 44-41 in overtime in front of a rocking home crowd. We'll break it all down. The offensive explosion led by the trio of quarterback Nick Minicucci, running back Joe Silver, and wide receiver Kyrie Duplessis. Timely defensive stops that flipped momentum in the game late, and a special finish from the special teams unit, forcing the game into overtime. Before we jump into it, if you're watching on YouTube, make sure to hit like and subscribe so you don't miss future episodes. If you're an audio listener or on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, wherever you find your episodes, please follow and leave us a review. Thanks for being with us for another week. Now let's dive in. Dan, Brody, what a start to the I was going to say start to the year, but it's week 3. But in my mind, this was the start to the year for the Blue Hens, starting the season with Delaware State, going out to Colorado. Like we talked about, week 3 was kind of the litmus test on what to expect with the Hens. Dan, I'm going to throw it to you first. How are you doing on this victory week? How was the view of the game on the other side of the field there?
It was toasty, Bryce. It was warm. It was a warm one. We were sun-splashed in the tub, but it was a thrilling conclusion to an overall thrilling game. And I was texting you, Bryce, and I think Brody as well in our group chat not long after the game. All time bleeds together when it's a heck of a game like that and goes into OT. I'm not going to place myself in time or space after the game, but I was reaching out to you guys, and I expressed that this game being this close to finish, this much of a nail-biter, this is the genre of game we've seen go against Delaware in many a close game at home against a quality opponent. Think about close losses to Villanova's first and foremost, but to Elon in 2023, to Richmond in 2022, close losses to quality opponents at home. To flip that on its head against UConn by the narrowest of margins, but it counts just the same. I think that's really a great moment for Delaware because you hang your hat on it, defending home turf in September, setting that bar for what the rest of the year could be, but also getting a sense of this is kind of the work that's cut out for Delaware as an underdog, going to be demanded of Delaware that they perform not necessarily to this level of the first half against UConn all year on offense, but needing a whole team effort to pull together and put together the pieces on defense and special teams situationally. It's hard for me to put the words together even on Tuesday because it was a battle that I think was a good indicator of the progress that's been made in facing really quality opposition and coming through and letting people know what Delaware is going to be about a little bit at the FBS level.
Well, I caught some sun myself, maybe before the game, with my back, with the sun towards my back there in our seats over in. I kind of forget the section I was in now because that was my usual spot. We got single game tickets for that one. But Brody, pat yourself on the back after having the prediction of the week. I believe you stated the score is 41-38, which honestly, a missed Delaware field goal and a Connecticut decision to go for it on 4th down instead of kicking a field goal away from hitting the nail on the head with how the actual scoreline finished out. A true visionary from that aspect. You preach the importance of renewing the Northeast rivalries from the former Yankee Conference A-10 days. This being the first against the Huskies in nearly 30 years. Did this exceed your expectations?
Well, Bryce, it was exactly what I thought was going to happen. I think no, I'm kidding. I can't believe that we won that game. You think about the missed kick right there in the fourth quarter in the north end zone. I thought we were toasted. I thought it was over. But then Coach Cardi, pulls a couple great defensive performances out of his guys. His team gets a huge stop on a fourth down that UConn did not have to go for. Then a game-winning drive put together by Nick Minicucci, Kyrie Duplessis. A very clutch kick by Nate Reed. Evidently, he learned something in the few minutes between those two kicks. He clutches up. I think ESPN said no college kicker situation here, which is great to hear for us because of our troubles with college kicker situations in the past. But he does a great job. He sends it to OT. And then once we held UConn to a field goal everyone knew exactly what was going to happen. We were going to have the QB power read up the middle. I think he called it he called his own number 3 straight times. He gets in the end zone, hops in the north end zone, grandstands. It's just a picturesque like scene. Some UConn podcast was like, they rushed this stadium. Nick Minicucci's a hero now in Newark, and he absolutely is. But on the flip side of that, I do kind of feel bad for UConn fans because just all week their podcasts and their broadcasts and everything is like, it's just like, I thought we were past this. I thought like we weren't going to lose to a team like Delaware. This administration always like tells us they're going to take the sport more seriously, and then they don't. I didn't think that we were going to lose to a team like this. And I feel kind of slighted by that because you lost to Delaware for 6 straight times. You got a 20-year head start in the FBS. What made you think you were going to start beating us now? I think they might have believed that they were past this rivalry, that they had moved on, but they're being brought kicking and screaming back to the Yankee Conference. There's no escaping. So that's all I have to say about that, is that it was a great team win by Delaware. The defense does kind of stress me out a little bit, but they clutched up when they had to. They made some good plays near the end. Huge team win. It's a signature win for Coach Carty. It's up there with the Navy win. It's I was saying this after, it's probably the most important win in the past 15 years of this program. And it just feels great. Huge relief. It's off your back. You go into this game thinking like, UConn is favored by 10.5. Of course, the spread went down as you got closer because everyone was putting their money on the Hens. And they all knew something because Delaware comes out victorious in this one.
Dan, let's start with the quarterback, Nick Minicucci. Not only threw for 265 yards and a touchdown, but ran in 3 scores like Brody was talking about on that power read, keeping the ball to himself. Really opening a new element of the offense there. The guests that we talked about how much Nick likes contact. That we'll get to later in this episode, but getting the walk off in the north end zone, like Brody mentioned as well. But I think my favorite moment of the game was when he directed a very composed 2-minute drill to force overtime. How impressed were you in Nick's first home start of 2025?
Yeah, impressed, very much so, and kind of that Minicucci magic theme that was reminiscent of the 2023 home playoff game against Lafayette. Kind of started to take on some of that feel in terms of the intensity and the pressure of a late game situation. But I have to admit, I still had in my mind, there are so many different ways to fall short in those situations. And I think it's a bunch of small decisions that add up to winning plays and winning drives and winning the game. It's so many small decisions that are enabled by Delaware's offensive line, having Stephen Demboski back at center and enabling Finton Bros, therefore, to shift to left guard, filling in for Patrick Shupp at left guard. I mean, Shupp had been a stalwart there and a mainstay, so we hope Patrick can get back in the lineup sooner rather than later. But for the Delaware offensive line to set the stage for then Nick Minicucci to make all kinds of great decisions on those reads, to tuck it himself and put his foot in the ground and go north and south, or to enable Joe Silver to have his head of steam and get around edges that may be set by Anwar O'Neal, or whichever way things are going on where the ball's headed on offense. So, yeah, impressed is the word for sure. Reassured by the guts and the grit and all those kinds of cliches that we'll throw around, but that were definitely visible, because you can go to small moments like Delaware getting a chunk to make it a shorter 4th down, and I believe 9, it may have been 4th and 9 on the ultimate pass interference defensively called on UConn that extended Delaware's drive. If Nick Minicucci decides not to tuck the football, and I say tuck the football, that might not have been what he literally did, but he takes off to run and pick up a small chunk to make it a little bit more of a reasonable 4th down. It's still 4th and long, but that, to me, that leads one thing leads to another. You get a chance to throw to a more manageable, more intermediate or shorter route that can draw a flag a little more easily with a turn by, I think the intended receiver would have been Kelly on the play. So I think that, I just think about little things like that, these small decisions that were made along the way. Like, okay, I'm not going to try to get everything on 3rd and long, even though it's a crazed 2-minute pressure situation, last chance to touch the ball in regulation, already down by 3. Just those kind of choices by Minicucci are good to see, because I mean, it's easy for us to say, oh yeah, that obviously that was the right choice to run the ball and get a manageable gain, but still a younger player, a guy who's played a lot, but isn't exactly Joe Fagnano's age either, right? And so for Minicucci to understand, I've got 4th down, I'm going to have a belief in 4th down when it comes to that. And in these 2-minute spots, you live to see the next play and try not to make life worse on yourself or harder on yourself by getting into 4th and 19 or something. Those things are in-game decisions that come from coaching too, and come from belief in your teammates. So yeah, love to see it.
Yeah, and even the play before that third, picking up some, I think he tried to leap over defenders, get out of bounds there in that 3rd down to stop the clock. But that 2nd down, progressions weren't there. Picks up 2 yards on a run there, just finding ways to make positive gains. And then they had the big play down the right side of Duplessis. And I think another one of my moments, 3rd and 12, when you're in UConn's field position, but not in that field goal range yet. Reeds aren't there downfield, finds Ellison Jr., who came in the game for Silver after going down for a quick check down that gets you into 4th and 1, that allows, that QB power that has been, I think, a positive play for the Hens all year when they need it.
And Bryce, if I could add and jump in, I think you'll get to this. That call is an outstanding call by Coach Carty. Understanding UConn's most likely going to give you the middle of the field, especially after a few seconds have gone by in the play. It's a little bit of a delayed check down, or I guess most check downs have a bit of a delay. They're not instantly check downs. That's why you call them a check down. But to understand that and have that be a valve for Nick to choose and for the play to be executed that way. But I thought that call was a good one, because you understand the clock and the timeout and the area of the field. You get so much of it, and then you choose to not. If you call timeout, all of a sudden 4th and 1 becomes harder, does it not? Because you want to have UConn a little bit more on its heels and power up the gut with Nick before they can even discuss it. I don't know if you were getting to that, but I really wanted to know what your thoughts on that were.
No, I mean, that's a great shout. And, if you think like you said, UConn's taken away the sidelines, and I kind of think about, I hate thinking hypotheticals, but I still think about if UConn went and kicked that field goal to make it a 6-point game. That drive takes away a lot of plays for the Blue Hens. They were comfortable with, trying to see, because, we would love to win the game in regulation here, but we'll be comfortable to try to, tie it and extend the game as well. And I think the Hens were comfortable with, taking what the defense was giving them. It was a great play. And I think that just, there's so many elements to football. You think about a true team sport, that maybe downfield options weren't there. Minicucci didn't feel pressured in the pocket. Didn't feel like he had to, first read wasn't there, I have to go. Stood in the pocket, but the offensive line allowed that pocket to stay there for Ellison to break out and get that gain. So I just think about that 2-minute drill, and they just looked like this wasn't their first 2-minute drill of the season. They just looked very composed in the moment, down in front of their home field fans. Let's talk about the 2 other big playmakers of the day, Brody. The production of Joe Silver and Kyrie Duplessis reminded me a lot of Marcus Yarns and Phil Lutz a season ago. We talked about all offseason. Who's going to be that downfield threat at receiver? Who's going to be that big play guy out of the backfield? I think Silver was maybe the easier guess. I think wide receiver was the biggest question mark. And Silver, 70-yard cutback run. What a highlight that was. The lane wasn't there, just being able to extend the play himself and take it to the house. While Duplessis, 161 yards and a score on 9 catches. And that one-handed catch is still awesome. I think the picture frame of it still is better than the catch he made against UConn. But that, just to go 50-50 on the sideline, catch it, keep both feet in bounds, and just take the rest of the space given to him, that was another beautiful play. Like, I think later we get to the favorite play of the day. I don't even think I want to touch that topic today because of how many of these huge plays that these 2 had today. Pre-game, the offense listed Jake Dahl was questionable and eventually didn't dress. Brody, how key were Silver and Duplessis in a day filled with big plays for the offense?
I mean, you talk about a game with 85 points in it. And there's a lot of plays that are made by your playmakers. So it's hard to really talk about just a few. And it's hard to talk about the contribution without, going on and on about everything that happened. But you talk about Duplessis as a downfield threat, kind of in the Hill Lutz category. I think about the game against Sacred Heart, I believe it was last year, where Lutz, gets thrown a pass on the boundary, and then he makes a move and then runs for a touchdown. That's what Duplessis did on the same sideline going the opposite way. Turned like a high point, like 50-50 ball into 6 points just by mossing the guy who was on him, keeping both feet in bounds and turning it upfield. You talk about the catch on the game-winning drive, game-tying drive rather. Just going up there and getting it, keeping both feet in bounds. I mean, just one foot in bounds because it is college, but he does keep both. So if there's any NFL teams out there, just keep an eye on Duplessis. Then you have Joe Silver, like you said, making that huge cut that I think a UConn podcast called High School Shit. It's insane. It's hard to even quantify how ahead of schedule this team is when it comes to their offensive production. And I'm incredibly impressed with the way that this team has come back after losing those playmakers this offseason, and just coming back and kind of acting like they never left.
Yeah, and I think what you said was right. The offense as a whole just looks like it's such a clean unit 3 weeks in the season. And a week ago, we talked about the offense didn't struggle progressing the ball. They averaged 41 yards per possession. They only had 1 3-and-out on the day. But it was a matter of executing in, those crucial moments when you're getting in that field goal range and scoring distance. And I think Dan mentioned last week, the more plays you run, the more plays of a chance, to make a mistake. And having 2 explosive plays on your own side of the field takes a lot away from in terms of margin of error. And I think the only other play I'll mention that wasn't a scoring play, I think was my favorite of the day, was the Delaware's first pass of the day. First down, incomplete following a sack on second down after a blitz. Minicucci on 3rd and long stepped in the pocket. I think it was 3rd and 16, stepped in the pocket to find Sean Wilson on the left side of the field running a corner route, gaining 32 yards on that 3rd and 16. And this is my last hypothetical. I played a lot of those what-if moments on that middle 8 for Colorado last week if they didn't score one or either one of those drives. But I think about if Minicucci to Wilson doesn't happen for 32 yards on that play, having to go 3-and-out right after your defense forced a quick stop, how does the beginning of this game shape out? Does the offense still go for over 500 yards? Does the defense, do its job again after, getting off the field themselves really quickly? So I just think about how big that play was to really set the tone for the rest of the day on terms of the offensive side of the field. But I think you all mentioned great points, and I want to think about this offensive performance for a long time, but we'll get into next week in a little bit. But let's jump over to the defense side of the ball, Dan. The Huskies also, rolled up over 500 yards themselves, but when it mattered, the Blue Hens defense made crucial late game stops, creating a turnover of known downs in the late fourth quarter, stopping a 3rd and 2 and 4th and 2. In the opening drive of overtime, Connecticut getting the ball down to the 2-yard line, and then being stopped and having to get outside of that, fourth down and go range where they have to settle for 3 points. Replay some of these end late game moments for me. I know it's an 11-man job, but who really stood out to you on these short yardage stops?
Oh man, yeah, it's deep. Defense understandably gets a lot of conversation this week in terms of the overall scope of the game. I understand how the game flow went against Delaware's defense. You did sense early on it was going to be whoever touched the ball last was going to get the job done. But the reason that Delaware touched the ball last was because of, setting aside overtime, coin toss, things like that, Delaware got to overtime because of a defensive stand. And so I'm going to go back here. I got to scroll through the fourth quarter notes here, the fourth quarter play-by-play. Delaware able to get the stop on downs. And you understand, getting a stop on downs in these situations we've seen at Delaware Stadium in these close games against really good opponents who I've mentioned before, JMU, Nova, teams that, like UConn, really sense they can get back on track. They can finish off a win. They smell blood in the water. It's so hard to get a stop late in these games because it feels like the momentum is on the 4-minute offensive side. It feels like the momentum is favoring the clock churning 4-minute offensive side where the inevitability sort of starts to creep in the back of your mind. But no, Delaware's defense with a stop and the ultimate 4th and 2 tackle by KT Say. Looking back at it, Say really read that pass by Fagnano to the short right side like a book. Like, I think you can see, if I was trying to break it down, kind of do a quick pause game, my stick work isn't so great on the film maybe compared to coaches. But anyhow, it looks like Say is breaking on that intended receiver and eventual ball carrier right on time. Like he's seeing that's where Fagnano's going to go. Now, part of that is the ability to make a smart decision, understanding Fagnano hasn't shown the propensity to carry it himself either necessarily, so you're not in conflict, because it looked like Say was really in isolation there. If Say winds up in conflict, it becomes more of a hesitation maybe defensively, and then maybe you don't make that same break toward the football and toward the ball carrier, and you don't get that stop. It was a heck of a catch, first of all, by Hansen. I think it was Hansen for UConn who reeled it in, but actually maybe the throw led him a touch long because he had to really extend for it, and Say is right there. Like, it doesn't matter if he's led a little bit long if Say is nowhere to be found, or any defender for that matter, but just to have that kind of decision making and that read of the play that UConn was unfolding there, that was strong. But you think about, it's easy to look at that 4th and 2 that UConn had, the Delaware 23, but there was also a 3rd and 2, and you have to stop on 3rd and 2 obviously in order to get to 4th and 2, and for Cam Edwards to be stopped for no gain by Nick Karika and Dylan Traynor. That's what's officially in the play-by-play box here. Could go back and visually confirm, see if there are any other bodies in there. I mean, it's a team effort to swarm like that, but I want to highlight those 2 names as well. I mean, that's just so much digging deep down and understanding that, setting aside having a short memory about all the other stuff defensively that had gone wrong for Delaware in the game, including in that second half with tough defensive penalties as well. To set aside that mental nonsense, it's all in the past. Just focus on a really gritty stop on 3rd and short to set up the ultimate Say tackle on 4th. So, yeah, I come away so impressed with end of regulation, with OT, having a sack by Jack Hall, who he got by his blocker and basically instantly off the snap in overtime as Delaware was backed up toward its goal line defensively. Ethan Saunders, Nick Karika there to also help clean up a gang sack where I think you see Blake Matthews too, like trying to jump over a body and just fly in from behind.
You had Matthews squared on that. Noah Matthews was we talk about the 3-3-5 front, but obviously in that goal line scenario had 4 D linemen out there, and Noah Matthews, Blake Matthews, both leaping in to really cause that stop on 3rd and 2 as well.
Yeah, another thing, I apologize for taking so much time on the mic, but talking about defense, have to talk about crediting Manny Rojas as well, defensive coordination-wise, because we say, oh my gosh, look at all these Delaware players who were in on these huge stops. Well, that's personnel groupings too, and that's just understanding the substitutions and the personnel combinations and having the right people out there to make those plays in the biggest moments. So, got to credit Coach Rojas as well in those late game scenarios where, it could be just as easy to say, I'm going to get a little bit panicked. We haven't stopped them much today. I'm going to get panicked and not stick to what I believe in. And clearly it paid out for Delaware at the very end.
Yeah, to get that sack. And we talk about how big, the secondary and the D-line are and really connecting on that. The secondary, looking at that sack, Fagnano was looking for, quick crossers immediately in the end zone. And the back half, both Traynor and Mole at first, I think ready for the run, first step, maybe, being, trying to read it, but then they really step back, and then the secondary really covering the end zone. There were no open options on the first 2 or 3 seconds of the read, and that gave the defensive line enough time to sniff it out. So a true team stop in the goal scenario and giving a chance for the offense to win the game. Brody, I'm gonna group the special teams into this defensive side here. What were you feeling on 2nd and 10 when the offense ran an inside zone to get the ball in the left hash in any yards they could before calling that final timeout, showing their hand that they felt this 45, 50-yard distance was going to be its best shot to send themselves into overtime?
Well, I was looking at just exactly how many inches they got on that draw play. because I knew that every inch was going to be needed. And it was, they said on the broadcast, the ball just barely made it over by about the length of a ball. And it was just enough. That's kind of how I felt the whole game, was that the offense was doing their thing. They were really just like scoring at will, and the defense was doing just enough, just all they needed to do. And that's kind of how it ended up, if the defense just does what they need to do. I don't know, if your offense scores 100 points, you can allow 99 and still win the game. It's not what you want to do as a defense. You want to allow 0. But realistically, allowing 99 if your offense can score 100 will get the job done. And special teams as well, falls into that category of doing what you need to do, getting the job done. Not necessarily being as bodacious as the offense was on Saturday.
Well, we're family friendly here, so I'm going to ask you, what was the reaction when the kick was good?
I was screaming. I was yelling out loud. For viewer context, I was in the car at this point. I had somewhere else I needed to be, and I had people counting on me to be there on time, and it crushed me. It really made me upset that I was missing out on the last minutes of this game. But I was driving. It was an hour and a half drive. I had to get there, so I had to leave after the missed field goal. And I think if I had the ESPN app open on my walk from my seat next to Bryce all the way to the Boy Scout lot, it would have crushed me, I think, like seeing UConn move the ball down the field. But by the time I got to the car, I think they were already within the range, and then I see they get stopped, and then I'm already driving. I'm trying to get down 896, the stretch of 896 with all the gas stations and the McDonald's before the highway, and of course nobody wants to drive at all. Nobody wants to drive the speed limit. They all want to drive 20 under for some reason. They're all stopping and starting at whatever tempo they want to. But then I got out of there, and that's when they kicked the field goal that would send them to overtime. And I was yelling out loud. I was, ah! I had both hands off the steering wheel on 301 at that point. And it was, I didn't know what else to say. I had no idea what to say. I was just yelling out loud in my car. There was nothing to say. There's no one else in the car. So I was just yelling. That's all you can do in that situation. So that's what I said.
What you can say now is the mental toughness of Nate Reed. Because it's, I mean, it feels like pitching in baseball, right? Or even just finding your spots or finding your mechanics or your rhythm. To have the mental toughness. It's so easy to catastrophize. Oh, what would happen if I miss another? And it's all, not that Delaware treats any one player this way, but it would feel all on me. Or what's going to happen? Hats off to the whole operation and for Nate's belief in the operation in front of him.
And that 10-minute stretch of that, final 2-minute drill and overtime and how we got there. I forgot Brody wasn't next to me there, but I did before the kick. Between the timeout and Nate running out to the field, I did see. This is something that you had to see it in the moment to see it, because I did see on the broadcast, was Cardi and Reed embracing each other before Nate went out there. The coach really showing, 1st and 10, incomplete pass on the right sideline. I don't think whoever the pass catcher was that couldn't hone in. I forget if it was Wilson or DePlacy, but on 2nd and 10, after not getting anything, clock stopped. They had a choice. Do we try to get another chunk and then we call a timeout, or we know we will use this timeout regardless. So let's get the ball in this range. Nate can hit it here, but we want to get the ball where he wants it, in terms of the left or right side or down the middle. And that's what he wanted. And it was cool to see. Like you said, it was kind of like a manager going to his closer. Maybe it hasn't been the best start of the year, but pitched a save there and maybe a hold in that moment. And,
yeah.
But but it was a really cool embracing between the two of them before that play had happened. But Dan, we've been talking about this game for a while. I figured this might have been our longest game review of the season so far, but I'll throw you one last chance to talk about your final thoughts on this game and this day as a whole.
Yeah, I was just thinking about the culmination of so many. I hate to look back so much or continually bring up this theme, but I know many listeners probably can relate to this, having gone to Delaware games much longer than me too, even though I've been going my whole life. There were games that have been like this over the years, that have been shootouts, that have been close calls, and it takes so much to go right and to hold on in overtime too, or to punch it over the edge in overtime too. So much has to go right. So one of those instant classic team wins overall. And since you gave me the floor for one last recap point, I have one underrated play nomination as well. I like that you talked about Delaware's first drive, right, Bryce?
Yeah, that Wilson catch on the first down of the game.
Yeah, big time. And Wilson having a part in breaking up like a near interception too, late in crunch time, I believe, as well. And I know, Brody, you tweeted about the Duplessis, I believe it was the second quarter touchdown where it was the catch in traffic and the breakaway by Duplessis, kind of underrated because it was only the first half, right? So that was okay. So I have one more underrated play, which I'm trying to track down right now, make sure I get it right in my notes. It's the third quarter. We're going to the third quarter. And it's easy to forget about the third quarter. I'm making sure I'm looking at the start of the second half. I am. It actually calmed down a bit in terms of like the offenses, right? Like I believe there was a trading of punts, if this is listed correctly. And UConn ultimately takes the third quarter lead, 31-28. So Delaware's down. Delaware's down at this juncture, but Delaware answers on the immediate following drive. And the reason that Delaware was able to answer in the third quarter was Delaware at one point, I'm not going to say the sole reason, but at one point Delaware faced a 4th and 5 at the UConn 36.
I knew this is where you were going. Yep.
I turned around after Delaware converted it, and I told I think I told my grandmother. Shout out to my grandmother as well, who was with us over in Section J. It was going to be a shout out at some point in the podcast, so I know she's watching and appreciate your help in watching everything. I turned around and said that was an excellent call by Coach Carty, because what we saw on 4th and 5 at the Connecticut 46 was a Minicucci pass, short to the left for Duplessis. It was an 8-yard gain, if I'm reading this correctly. I mean, I think it was a design, and this is why we're looking to do some video breakdowns too on YouTube next, but my recollection, a design QB roll, get Nick Minicucci throwing on the run where he's comfortable, and you have Duplessis, the best receiver of the day in some respects. Well, I guess maybe the consensus best receiver of the day, out in space. Just the call there was really, really strong, and it sneakily helped set up an eventual one of Silver's rushing touchdowns. And so I just look at it as that was just so big, because going band for band in terms of UConn scores was enormous. You just had to keep trading blows. And as soon as Delaware maybe didn't have an answer on offense and continued to trail by a single score, you risk UConn opening it up by 2 scores. And then maybe mentally you're taking a little more out of your game. I'm glad, Bryce, you're able to read me a little bit there. We're on the same wavelength. I'm sure that sticks out in your mind too. And you could correct if I'm misremembering details of the play.
Yeah, no, that was everyone mentioned a Duplessis catch at one point. We talked about that big catch on that 2-minute drill. We talked about the 50-50 catch that went the full distance, and yes, I talked about that 4th and 5 catch as well. Like you said, roll out to the left, Duplessis, lined up on the left side and completely cutting out. It's one of my favorite hot routes in NCAA 26. 3rd and short, 4th and short. Set up that quick out. When you're going on a quick out route like that, you're usually only leaving yourself on a one-on-one. There's not a lot of opportunities where a linebacker or safety can get over there. So that's sometimes you're setting that yourself up. You're not looking for an X play there. You're just trying to move the chains to get yourself comfortable again. And yeah, I think that's a great point. The Blue Hens 3 for 3 on 4th downs that day. I talked about 40% being the honeypot for 3rd down, and they finished exactly 40%, 6 for 15. I think the average distance I wrote in my article was like 6.5. So that's like 2 yards less than the average for Colorado. And that takes away even that 3rd and 16 that they hit in that first drive. And yeah. I think before that 4th and 9, it was like a 3rd and 12, 3rd and 13, or I think maybe even longer than that Minicucci picked up yards, and 3rd and 12 when they had the 2-minute drill. So they found ways, even if they didn't convert it in that 40%, they set themselves up for fourth and manageable and eventually going 100% success on the day. So to wrap up this UConn talk, we stressed the margins. The defense had big stops and key moments. UConn, we didn't really get to how successful UConn was on the day, but UConn did move it. And I expect to be in shootouts this season. We're going to be facing a lot better offenses than we have in years past. But it's a matter about making those stops when they're needed the most. And the defense did that on multiple occasions. They cleaned up the middle eight. UConn didn't score in the middle eight in the game. They didn't score in the first drive of the game. They didn't score a touchdown. They didn't run out the clock at that final first down to end the game there. So finding ways to make plays in key moments. The offense making plays in key moments, as we talked about. Special teams, which we talked about, hasn't had a clean operation in a few weeks into the season, but performed when called upon. That's the difference between a win and a loss. It really is. Delaware won all three phases at the end of the game.
And one more small thing. I'm so sorry. You should flag me for this, but I'm going to squeeze this in. Think about Delaware penalties. You could correct me on specific stats and team stats comparing UConn and Delaware side by side from this classic, but it could have been kind of easy for Delaware to lose some discipline after one of UConn's scoring drives was aided by various defensive penalties Delaware committed, maybe some frustration, certainly in the stands. But I mean, frustration could have been carried out on the field by Delaware too, and then it could kind of build on itself. And I didn't see Delaware cough up extra penalty yards that seeded the end of the game. And that in an emotional game, that can happen too. It's another one of the long list of ways to lose, whereas you have to be pretty perfect to win on those tight margins. So I wanted to throw that in there too to think about, because I don't think we've said much this year about penalties or, this was really sloppy or this or that in certain drives and spurts maybe. But overall, I think in the Coach Carty era, it's been pretty rare that Delaware has been heavily penalized.
Yeah,
they were relatively disciplined, I thought. They had more penalties than average this game, but like you mentioned, three of those came on back-to-back plays on that third quarter UConn scoring drive, and those refs are lucky that they took my batteries going through the metal detector, and I'm sure that's the case for a lot of fans as well, because if Delaware ends up losing that game, I think those refs need to escort it out.
Well, they did. We were watching the refs closely at the end of overtime, because the game's not over until officials are clearing the field. I mean, leaving the field, not just clearing to the sidelines and saying we got to keep this going, but leaving the field. I mean, what a chaotic ending, but in the best of ways.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. You mentioned it. Delaware 6 penalties, 60 yards. They had 14 on the season, so the biggest of the season. But 3 of them came in back-to-back plays for 40 yards. So that was the chunk of their day. Really clean outside of that. Finish and closing. A true team win. That they won in the margins together. The defense made the stops when needed to allow the offense to allow the special teams get in position to tie it, and the defense allowed the offense to walk off and celebrate as one in the end zone. So super cool moment. True team win. That I'll remember for a long time. So, now let's carry us into, our final segment before we jump into thinking ahead for the Hens and their first conference matchup against the Florida International Panthers. But first, let's jump into Dan and I's conversation with one of the stars of the day on the offensive side of the ball, our second version Inside the Huddle with senior running back Joe Silver. And we're here for another version of Inside the Huddle, this time senior running back Joe Silver joining us. Joe, thanks for joining us here at Feathers and Field Goals.
Yeah, no problem. I'm excited to be here.
We're so excited to have you, and especially after last week's thriller for the program, winning its first game against an FBS opponent in this new era. How important was a win like this for the program, especially in a setting in front of the home fans against a quality opponent like the UConn Huskies?
I mean, we took a lot of time in the offseason to really up the intensity, because we knew this season was going to ask a lot more of us. And then within the past few weeks, there's kind of just been, again, like an upped intensity, especially because we were executing kind of half-heartedly in the first 2 games. And we knew we just needed a couple more people to make a couple more plays, and our offense was just going to take off. And that's what showed on Saturday.
And Joe, congratulations on your performance and the team's win on Saturday. It's great to have you here. echoing what Bryce said. We saw you score, your first touchdown of the season in Boulder, and then you finished week 3 with 179 rushing yards, 2 touchdowns. I mean, how did the day feel individually for you? Especially, we saw your 70-yard run with the big cutback and change of direction. How did it feel for you as an individual, the performance you were able to put together against UConn?
Yeah, I'd say from week to week, it felt like I just felt more and more confident as the games went on, especially against UConn. After I got my first, I think it was like a 20-yard run, I just got up and I was just feeling it. Like, it was just one of those games where, like, you're just feeling it. And like, you're one of the best players on the field today. And I was just able to produce for my team, and that's just one of the best feelings, especially when I can make huge X plays that can propel my team towards victory.
We know the offense stresses X plays, like you mentioned, and we saw them all throughout the offense in this one, outputting 44 points, 512 yards. You talked about, some kind of executing half-heartedly. What specific adjustments were made after the trip out from Colorado to exploding like this in week 3?
Honestly, there weren't many changes made in terms of like running different plays or a different scheme or anything. It was really just within each person, kind of taking more accountability and being more focused and intentional in all the things that we're doing throughout practice the entire week, and especially on game day. Because Coach Carty is always going to put us in the right position to make a good play. We just have to go make it.
And Joe, another thing we always hear the program echo, of course, is committed, relentless, and finish. Those pillars right there. And the finish to the UConn game, of course, the story of the game and clinching it in the final seconds to extend it. And then we know at the very end how all that ends. A 2-minute drill, a condensed field in overtime with you guys on offense starting at the 25. We know you folks are definitely practicing those scenarios a lot. I'm sure it's drilled quite a bit. You're ready for those pressure situations. But how did you feel that the offense was prepared? Early in the year, this is that kind of, it starts to feel like a tone-defining moment, those pressure-packed moments late in the game.
Yeah, like you said, it's one of our core values. And when the time comes, we're just ready for that moment because our offense and our team is built on that. And it was just great to be able to there were points where it looked like the game wasn't going to go our way in that final drive. And we had to kind of say to ourselves, like, we're still in this. We still have the next play. Like, we're still alive. Let's go finish this thing. So it really took a lot for everybody to finish that game, especially with how high scoring the game was. Knowing that as an offense, we were just going to have to outscore them. So we were just going to have to keep going until the final whistle. Just keep scoring.
Speaking of preparation from fall camp into moments like this, one of the biggest in-season switches was Nick Minacucci taking over the offense. How is it being in the huddle, getting handoffs and passes from Nick, who has really stepped up for the program in each of the last 3 seasons when his name's been called upon?
Yeah, I mean, I trust Nick with all my heart out there. I've been next to him. I always think back to that Lafayette game when we both stepped up and made some big plays. And ever since then, like, I just feel like we mesh together. We mesh together well out there. Our games complement each other well. And it's just nice to be right next to him, knowing that I can trust him and he can trust me.
It's got to be, Joe, pretty cool to see Nick run the way he does, kind of like a tailback and kind of a bit of a bruiser. Would you say he's kind of a bruiser out there? I mean, I've described him that way. What does it look like to you?
I mean, I hate how much he loves contact. Like, I just want him to be safe, but he just wants to hit someone so bad. And I'm like, dude, no, please just go down. But I mean, like those plays where he we would motion out and then he would do what looked like a QB draw, like that was just inside zone for the quarterback. So he has to read it exactly like I'm reading inside zone. And it's nice to see him find the hole and hit it with full speed, completely running guys over for first downs and things like that. It's great to see from a QB.
And Bryce, I know
Nick doing that multiple times this season, like you said, not once, twice, 3 times in last week, and then also scoring the program's first touchdown of the season against Delaware State. And we talked about the X plays in the offense. You had one of them on that 70-yard cutback run, another member with an X play for 60-plus yards for a score was out wide, and Kyrie Duplessis, who has really made an impact since joining from Coastal Carolina. How important has Kyrie's addition been to a strong list of a long list of returning playmakers into this offense?
Yeah, I mean, it's always nice to have guys that can make plays outside. Especially in the Colorado game. I feel like we didn't have as much playmaking outside, and that kind of led to us not producing as many points as we feel like we should have. And those guys took that to heart and came out this week with a different mindset and knew that they had to produce, especially Kyrie. I mean, he just has a knack for the ball. Like, he's always going to catch that ball. He'll take a hit. He doesn't care. But having him on our team just adds another layer of depth that we already had. And I mean, I actually hosted him on a visit, and he was in like my living room, and like talking to him, I just felt that he was a guy that was going to fit in our program well. Just how he carried himself, how much he cared about the game, and how detailed he was, and like all of this, everything that he did.
Building off of Kyrie's individual performance and the overall success of the offense, Joe, last week against UConn. We keep saying last week, it's one of those things, it's hard to turn the page maybe sometimes from such a memorable day and such success on offense, but how will your team and your group on your side of the ball look to carry the momentum, a conference opener far from home, a new place to play? What kind of is going to be the key to keeping this thing going after such close margins a week ago?
Yeah, I mean, we saw it in the Colorado game on our scoring drive. We were just so efficient, and we were really clean on that drive. And we kind of saw that, and we were like, this is who we are. Like, we can be this every time we step out on the field. And that definitely showed against UConn. And we just have to keep that mindset of, like, this is who we are. We can execute on every single play. We just have to, again, be intentional, be detailed, and just make the plays that are there for us. And if we keep that mindset every week, I really don't see us being stopped. So that's just the mindset we're going to have to take down to Miami.
Well, Joe, thanks for giving us some insight on last week, the season as a whole, and what's ahead. Let's finish off this interview with probably my favorite segment of this, getting some rapid-fire questions. And you talked a bit about that scoring drive against Colorado, so I kind of wanted to start you off with this one. This might be an obvious answer, but curious to see your perspective here. What do you enjoy more, scoring a long 70-yard touchdown like you did last week, or maybe punching it in from short range behind the offensive line after a long double-digit play drive?
That's tough. I definitely have to say the long touchdown, though, because, like, as you're running, you just hear the crowd screaming, and, like, man, there's no other feeling, especially, like, when I watch it back on film. Like, I see all the guys put their hands up, and, like, there's just no other feeling like that. But at the same time, that Colorado touchdown, like, it felt so good because it was such a long drive and there were so many plays and I was so tired, and it just felt so good to be nudged in by my O-lineman and be able to just run right behind them and just keep my legs churning, because that's just more like a team bonding moment. Like, I feel with my teammates in that moment. But yeah, the 70-yard touchdown is more like of an individual like high, I guess. But yeah, they're both pretty awesome, but I guess I'd have to take like a long touchdown.
Now that makes perfect sense, and I'm glad you brought up the offensive line because they definitely deserve a lot of discussion that Bryce and I will get to in our additional segment. Great to see Steven Domboski back as well on that front, and just it was a treat to watch. But building on here, our rapid fire, I'll try to keep it rapid. We asked Noah Matthews, or Bryce did, last time out on this segment, who the funniest teammate was in the trench mob over on the defensive line, and James Yelbert was Noah's response on the D-line side. Do you have, and I know kind of the Conference USA Media Day had this question too, a funniest teammate on your side of the ball?
I have to go with either Jake Dahl or Jakari. Those guys, oh my gosh. they're hilarious. I can
If they're anywhere near as funny as they are with the ball in their hands, right? We saw some of their moves in open space against Colorado. So, yeah.
Well, again, Joe, thanks so much for your time here. And we'll finish off this. This is actually a question I've been meaning to ask you since that Conference USA media kickoff. You talked about how much you love to hike. I'm also a big-time hiker myself, backpacker. I've been on some amazing trips. And I wanted to get your thoughts on what is the coolest hike that you've ever done, either locally or all time. I'm always looking for new recommendations.
Yeah, so I actually more recently got into like the hiking scene, probably within the past like year and a half. Like I went outside one day and I was like, oh, this is awesome. But the most recent, I would say the best hike that I've been on recently was at Hawk Mountain in Pennsylvania.
That's really just
good the hawks were like flying right around me, and it was just like the most surreal experience ever. Yeah.
Hawk Mountain's a really cool one.
I also cool, was in Shenandoah over the summer, and I went to I think it was Mary's. It's like Mary's Peak or something like that. And I watched the sunrise there. That was nice.
That's cool. Well,
Yeah.
if you ever get a chance to go back up to Colorado, I went to Rocky Mountain National Park recently.
Yeah.
Some beautiful hikes out there. But
I want to go west.
yeah. Well, it's a different world than out here.
Yeah.
But there's still some great stuff in the Poconos locally for sure. But Joe, thanks again for joining us for our second edition of Inside the Huddle. Safe travels down to Miami for this first Conference USA matchup for the Hens, and best of luck the rest of the season.
Thank you. Thanks for having me, guys.
Amazing conversation with Joe. And again, our one last thanks to him for taking the time with us. And I'm going to throw it over to Brody now for a new version of the pecking order.
Well, thank you, Bryce. As you know, repeat viewers might know that this is my weekly power ranking of CUSA. So I'm just going to throw my rankings up on the screen here. We're going to go bottom of the top. And here at the bottom, we still have Middle Tennessee and Sam Houston. Not a whole lot that I like about either of these teams. Of course, Sam Houston's 0-3. They had a bye this week. Middle Tennessee had a win this week, but I'm still not, convinced that they're a team to write home about to anybody. Here we have Kennesaw at 10. They're another one of those 1-2 teams. I do like the energy that they had against Wake. But yeah, again, there's not a whole lot to talk about. They just won against their FCS opponent, so they're now a 1-2 team. We have Missouri State here at 9, hosted SMU this week. They kept it close, kind of like Wake Forest kept it close with Kennesaw, but then ended up losing to SMU at home, which is a great draw, getting them at home, but a very hot day, which I know that their program was not happy to have happened to them on that day. Number 8, we have New Mexico State. Not a whole lot to like about this team, but they are 2-1. So at the very least, they have to be top 8 if they're 2-1. Now, to contradict myself, as I often do, we have UTEP right above them, who I do actually like a little bit more than I like New Mexico State. Luckily, they play each other every year, so by the end of the season, we'll truly know who's better, because head-to-head rankings actually do play a part in my power rankings, unlike many others that are out there. Number 6, we have Liberty. I don't know what's going on with this Liberty team, man. They dropped one to Bowling Green that they didn't look good in at all. I held them accountable for keeping it close with Maine. They obviously lost to Jacksonville State. There's not a lot to like about this Liberty team apart from what they've done in years past, and that just isn't convincing to me, especially because Delaware wasn't in the conference last year, and so as a Delaware podcaster, it's just not going to matter to me very much what happened last year. It's about this year, and they are still high for what has happened this year. They're 1-2. They're very high for being 1-2. Next is Delaware, obviously coming off of a huge win against UConn, that they were 10.5-point underdogs at the start of the week. Of course, that went down over time, but it's just a great win, great program win for Delaware, so I raised them one spot from 6 to 5. Then FIU is back in the top 4 after going down last week. This looks like a very complete team. Of course, we play them this week, so we have that head-to-head data coming up soon. Number 3 is La Tech, another team that looks pretty complete to me. Here we have Jacksonville State and Western at 1-2. This could go either way to me. I'm not sure if these teams play each other this year. I really hope so, because that would be a great game. If they don't during the regular season, then we might see that for this USA Championship game. But you could make an argument that that Western and Jacksonville State should be switched. For now, Western, despite losing, being 2-1, they're still in my number 1. Of course, Jacksonville State has also lost on the season, so they're number 2. But that's my pecking order. And we have some great conference matchups this week, so we got some more head-to-head data on these teams. Transitioning into the rival rundown, we have a great rival rundown matchup this week. We have Liberty and James Madison. Currently, James Madison is being favored by 11.5 points. Rather, it started at 11.5 points. It's now 8.5. They're 67.5% likelihood to win. You had Ethan Vasco has 3 interceptions on the year to Barnett's 0 on the year. Liberty, of course, dropping one last week to Bowling Green, looking very sloppy. And JMU, unfortunately, looking pretty good, although they've only played 2 games. Wake Forest is another team I want to highlight. They looked pretty good against NC State in that first half, more so the first quarter, as they go up 2 scores on NC State, and then that evaporates by the end of the half. But keeping an eye on Wake because they are our last non-conference opponent of this year. Of course, November 22nd is that game in week 13. So we're keeping an eye on Wake as the year goes on. Of course, Temple loses to Oklahoma, and you have UMass lose again. It doesn't matter who they're playing; they're just going to lose. Then UConn, of course, losing to the Hens. And those are the majority of my rival rundown contenders. We had an embarrassing performance by Villanova against Penn State. At least Delaware scored in the first quarter and not in the fourth quarter against Penn State a few years ago. And I think that's all I have for rival rundown. The Yankee Conference standings are being posted on my Twitter, so keep an eye out for the Yankee Conference, which there was some movement there this week. So thank you, Bryce.
Yeah, thanks for another rundown. And, we covered so much UConn game. I'll be super brief on this, but very much looking forward to that Liberty-James Madison matchup. I think this is an opportunity for the Flames to get right against now a Virginia rival they're going to be playing for a lot of years coming, and who will have a great opportunity to play both teams in the future as well, and the Flames a little bit closer. So I'll be watching Liberty side of the ball there, and just curious if they get back right.
No, I don't think so.
Yes,
I think they're going to get crushed. But that's just me.
Yeah, we'll get there. I believe that there's 6-point underdogs right now, but as you can see, I changed the outfit because it's getting a little hot in here. Maybe it's the rain that was here today on our recording day, but I think it's time to head down to Miami for our scout team interview with Jake Gibson of Paws Up Podcast to learn more about our opponent this week in the Florida International Panthers.
Moving forward into our scout team segment here on Feathers and Field Goals during FIU week for Delaware, as the Fightin' Blue Hens get set to open up for the first time in school history Conference USA play. It starts on the road down at South Beach at Pit Bowl Stadium. The Blue Hens versus the Panthers, and helping us understand the host Panthers this week, it's Jake Gibson of the Paws Up Podcast, of course, our colleague and teammate as well on the CUSA Podcast Roundtable. Jake, it's great to see you again after we got to see each other and be part of conversations in preseason over at the Roundtable, and now it's already game week here for these two sides in conference play.
Man, time flies, doesn't it, in the college football season? But it's great seeing you guys, and definitely honored that the first CUSA game in Delaware history as a member of this conference is against FIU. So I think that's really cool, and we welcome you to Pit Bowl Stadium here in the 305. It should be a very fun time here, assuming we don't get hit with another hour and a half lightning delay.
Yeah, that's something certainly we hope to avoid. And Bryce, it's just my take on this, and I'll get this out of the way early. I'm looking forward to the soundtrack as well at the venue because I have not been to the stadium since it got its name. I enjoy Pitbull. I was up at a Pitbull concert a number of years ago, freshman year, and yeah, it's definitely one of the best names in college football. So anyhow, I'm sure it'll be a great atmosphere in that respect. But as far as what's going on at Pitbull Stadium on the field, I guess the best way to start out things, Jake, could be to get a sense of what head coach Willie Simmons has meant to FIU and leading into this season, setting things up to now a strong start, having the roster with some key pieces like its quarterback we'll get to a little later. It just seems like it's been a great fit for Coach Simmons and FIU having both sides married that way.
You know, Willie Simmons was actually a candidate for the head coaching job prior to Mike McIntyre getting that spot after the Butch Davis era at FIU, and the reasons didn't really change. He's a successful coach in his previous stops in Prairie View A&M and Florida A&M, where I think he's most known for. He's never had a losing season as a head coach of a college football program, and hopefully that continues this season. So far, so good. He has this team ready to play game in and game out. He's talked about developing a fantastic culture that he's used to in some of his previous spots, since he has not just knowledge of the FCS level, the HBCU level, but even the Power Conference level, since he was a coach at Duke last season following the hiring here at FIU. He is a Florida kid. You know, he's very used to this state and the talent it produces. One of his top priorities is recruiting talent from the South Florida area for the future, which, I mean, I don't know about you guys, but I'm very much confident that the best talent in football comes from sunny South Florida, and he's tapping into that almost immediately here in his time at FIU. He brings a bit of swagger, he brings camaraderie, and as far as the FIU faithful goes, he's bringing a lot of trust, and beating your rivals in the Florida Atlantic Owls for the first time since 2016 certainly helps when it comes to building trust with the fan base.
Jake, thanks for being here with us. I'm excited for our collaboration on, all three avenues of our Conference USA Roundtable connection. The Panthers and the Blue Hens have had similar starts to their 2025 season, handling their home opener against an FCS opponent. And week 2, having a pretty strong first half against a Power 4 opponent. And then, maybe getting a little bit out of hand in terms of the box score, but really, showing signs of competing on both sides of the ball. And then week 3, having a big regional rivalry win. And maybe Delaware is a little bit more of a pass rivalry, but the Panthers having a big Shula Bowl win in week 3. Talk about the season so far for the Panthers as a whole. Thinking about maybe preseason expectations heading into now, how have they kind of fared out on both sides of the ball and as a team?
I think as far as their record goes, being 2-1 at this point, it's definitely met my expectations. To look good against Bethune-Cookman, which is what we wanted, since FIU unfortunately doesn't have a great track record of just blowing out FCS squads with recent games, including an overtime win over Bryant and a loss to Monmouth. So it's nice to see them just wallop an FCS team for once. And then while you didn't win, you didn't beat Penn State, but there were a lot of positives to take away from that game for FIU, specifically on defense. I mean, holding Penn State to 10 points in the first half and doing what they did against the starting offense for 3.5 quarters, essentially. Definitely a lot of great takeaways from that game. And of course, beating the Florida Atlantic Owls in the Shula Bowl has been the cherry on top. It's one of those things where FIU could lose every game from here on out, but you beat FAU. You finally have the Shula Bowl trophy back here at the cage. It's a great feeling for sure. So defensively, I think FIU has been wonderful. Every single part of that unit has looked great at top, mostly great. The rush defense specifically has been phenomenal, and the secondary has locked down quarterbacks quite consistently, including Caden Veldkamp for FAU, who was meant to be one of the top quarterbacks in the group of 5. They made him look not that great, which was awesome to see. And then offensively, the running game has been spectacular. Definitely still some questions regarding the passing game. Not to say that there's a problem with our quarterback in Kewan Jenkins. It's just some of the few X's and O's here that I think still need a tweaking as the season progresses. But overall, at this point, I can't complain about much. It's been a pretty fun start to the season, and now we get to see how this FIU team stacks to the rest of Conference USA here real soon.
Jake, it's so critical, I think, especially in a coaching transition to find a way to have QB continuity, which is not, it's not exactly like I'm giving a hot take there or saying anything that listeners wouldn't already have heard, but we saw it at Delaware, Bryce. You can recall Nolan Henderson and the Ryan Carty continuity with Coach Carty coming in. Keywan Jenkins being in place and being at the helm for FIU this season. What's the scouting report on Jenkins overall?
Well, Willie Simmons kind of remarked that he was his biggest pickup from the transfer portal because Jenkins entered his name into it, but withdrew after some conversations with Willie Simmons and a very expensive dinner in one of the luxurious restaurants here in South Florida to really drive the nail in the coffin. But Keywan has now become a veteran leader in this FIU offense. I think the program in general, he's become the face of the team. And I'm sure you guys know in FCS, let alone Group of Five, it's really hard to retain a quarterback for 3 seasons at this point. So the fact that FIU has done that is wonderful. Jenkins is a very solid dual threat quarterback that can make plays happen with his legs if the pocket collapses. But when he gets time in the pocket to throw, he can be very accurate with the ball. His decision making, I think, has gotten a lot better during the years have gone on. And as far as his legacy at FIU, I mean, he's already shattering records the longer he stays here. I think he will continue to break a lot of passing records for FIU. A very young football program, admittedly, but he definitely has the talent, and I think he has the more than enough potential to be one of the top quarterbacks, like Conference USA predicted, with him being the preseason Offensive Player of the Year.
Thinking about conference recognition, week 3, having a big day out of the backfield. We'll give you an opportunity to talk about number 5. I think probably the biggest name that Hens fans should learn about heading into this matchup on Saturday.
Keyshawn Owens. What a back he's been so far for FIU this season. He unfortunately ended up with 999 career yards at Bethune. We thought it was 1,000. We thought he had crossed it until we found out later, no, he actually didn't. So, oh well. But yeah, Owens has been the head of this running back room for FIU that has so much potential. I said that Owens, along with Devontae Lyons, who was our main returner alongside Owens, as well as Anthony Carey, a pickup from Georgia Tech, would be the 3-headed monster for the Panthers. And so far, that hasn't really been the case. Owens has, at points, put the team on his back this season. And well, they continue to win, so I don't really see a problem with that. He is a very savvy playmaker who, if the offensive line works with him, which they have done multiple times this season, he can absolutely blitz by opposing defenses, such as the case, especially in the second half against Florida Atlantic, when they boat raced the Owls in that third quarter. And a large part of that was with what Keyshawn Owens could do with the ball in his hands. He is a absolute troublemaker. And yeah, I do expect him to have another big day and be one of the primary weapons for this FIU offense.
We've zeroed in on FIU's offense, Jake, for good reason, those 2 headliners that we've just got into. But defensively, how would you describe what FIU really hangs its hat on or the play style of the FIU defense that I know you were also complimentary of here earlier in our convo?
Yeah, I mean, what you get from FIU's offense is to be expected. Maybe the only negative I will say, and it's not really a negative, but the big difference from seasons ago to sort of finish touching up on the offense is FIU used to be wide receiver university with the talent they've kind of produced. Tyrese Chambers, Eric Rivers, and Dean Patterson last season. Probably our most noteworthy alumni ever being T.Y. Hilton, who went on to have incredible success in the National Football League. They always had a big wide receiver one. This season, that might not be the case just because of how many pass catchers are getting the ball in this new offensive system they're kind of rolling out. So don't expect to see 1,000-yard rusher this season. And you do, I really couldn't tell you who that could be because everyone's getting equal opportunities to catch passes in this offense. So it's just it'll be probably the most interesting to see how the offense evolves as the season goes on. Now, when it comes to the defense, it's a pretty experienced room, and in the areas where there weren't experience, they brought in some absolute troublemakers from the transfer portal. I mean, the defensive line has absolutely shut down pretty much every team's running game at this point. Even Penn State's offense struggled at times to run the ball with 2 of the top running backs in all of college football. And then the same thing could be said for their game against Florida Atlantic. FAU was, I think, the first major test of where this defense, let alone this team, really stands as far as competition because, well, Bethune-Cookman was an FCS school and Penn State was Penn State. FAU was our first test of how this team can look against a group of 5 opponent. And on defense, specifically, they passed. The defensive line was kicking butt. And the secondary, like I said, 3 interceptions against one of the top quarterbacks in group of 5. It's a very experienced unit with a lot of experience in the coaching staff as well, with Javon Dewitt as the defensive coordinator and then Anthony Gator as the secondary coach. It's been wonderful to see how the defense has looked so far. Really, I think between the offense and the defense, I feel a lot more confident in this defense for the Panthers right about now.
Jake, I think a big question for Blue Hens fans in this transition was how are the trenches going to hold up? Delaware runs a unique 3-3-5 defensive front, and at the FCS level, they were able to break through. And heading into Colorado's matchup, it was a big question mark. Were they going to be able to break through that Colorado offensive line? And they did show that with 5 sacks and 11 TFLs on the day. The offensive line was a big reason why the Blue Hens were able to score 44 points against Connecticut and run I think Willie Simmons talked about in his press conference how successful that power read offense was for Delaware. And talk about the trenches a little bit for FIU. Is it a strength for the team on both sides of the ball?
I think the offensive line so far this season has done better than how I thought it would be. I think that was one of the biggest concerns as far as a specific roster position for the Panthers. And thus far, I think they've succeeded in giving Kewan Jenkins enough time in the pocket through the majority of the games. Obviously, it kind of crumbled towards the end there in that Penn State game. But other than that, it hasn't been too awful, I would say, so far this season. So, yeah, the offensive line overall has looked pretty good. And on the defensive line, like I said, they can shut down an opposing offense's running game just as good as any team, not just the group of 5, maybe in the nation at this point. We'll have yet to see as the season kind of progresses and how they can hold. But you have some big-time troublemakers like Keegan Davis, Kenton Simmons, and then you bring in the linebackers who aren't afraid to get to the quarterback at times, like Johnny Chaney Jr., Josiah Taylor, who Josiah Taylor is actually filling in for Percy Courtney Jr., who unfortunately got injured earlier this season. He's been about the best substitute for that spot that you could have asked for with what he's been able to do thus far this season. So they talked about it in that presser. They're going to stick with what they've done so far this season, even with that new defensive scheme that they'll be facing in Delaware, not to mention the dual threat quarterback that the Blue Hens have, which will be the first real big dual threat type of passer that the Panthers will take on this season. So it'll be interesting to see how that plays out. But I can tell you they have a lot of confidence in what they've put out already.
Jake, this has been really informative and helpful, and it's been exciting already just to be engaged with you and get that much closer to a conference game. We were talking, Bryce, so much about July 1 and all of the fanfare and unveiling of CUSA logos on the field, and you put your banners up, and the other members of the league get their banners in Delaware Stadium and in the Bob. But this is where it gets real. You got to get on a plane and get down to Miami and see where you stand. And so this has been great, but want to wrap up with this last question. It's mandatory, I think, for our listeners. We'll have any number of folks heading down from Newark, doing 302 to 305. What would be your recommendations for the area? Of course, I think people have a certain idea of Miami, I guess, but it's so much that can be overwhelming, right? So whether it's campus and right around the immediate campus and on campus at FIU or down in the city, what are your thoughts on what's a can't miss?
Man, I think FIU has such a wonderful campus. If you're on there just looking for a quick drink, definitely be sure to grab a cafecito from Cafe Bustelo. It's Cuban coffee, or as I like to say, Cuban rocket fuel will get you through the entire day. But definitely, if you're down in Miami, definitely hone in on all the great Hispanic food we have here. Cuban sandwiches, arepas, empanadas. Definitely branch out and step away from the northeastern food for a second and try some southeastern seafood and all the Hispanic meals here, because it'll definitely not disappoint. And then, like you said, Pitbull Stadium's a vibe. You're going to hear a lot of classic Pitbull bangers as the game goes by, and not to mention some great vibes there. And it's a university and a program that really recognizes the Hispanic culture in this region of the United States. So you'll definitely be meeting a lot of the FIU faithful that come in all shapes and sizes. So it's just a great vibe here. And I think more and more people are buying into this FIU football program. The attendance so far for both games, Bethune and Florida Atlantic, has been great, especially considering that both games were delayed due to lightning in the area. So that leads me to what another thing you need to do is bring a rain jacket or a poncho, because you never know when South Florida likes to change its weather. It's very bipolar down here. So definitely come for the vibes, and hopefully don't leave with a W. That'll be for the Panthers. But yeah, definitely it's going to be fun if you do make it out here, and the food's going to be good. You can trust me on that.
Well, Jake, thanks for all the insight on the Panthers on the field, and for the area surrounding the stadium. I know College Game Day is going to be down in Miami the same weekend, which I don't know if fans will be able to make two stops work in that same spot. I don't know how close Miami and FIU stadiums are between each other, but yeah. So. But again, thanks for being with us to preview our first ever Conference USA matchup over here in Newark. I want to give you an opportunity. We're going to be collaborating all week long between our two spaces and the CUSA Podcast Roundtable. But I want to give you a last opportunity to just plug where the Blue Hens fans can find your work, looking for more content and preview for this matchup.
So you definitely follow my personal @Jake the MC, where I drop all of my stuff for FIU football, not to mention some of the other sports I tend to cover, such as Florida Panthers, the Stanley Cup champion Florida Panthers, might I add, not to mention the even NASCAR at Homestead Miami Speedway here and then. And not to mention my friend and co-host Kevin Barral @Kevin_Barral for his coverage of the Panthers, not to mention Miami Marlins stuff. He's very big on that too. And of course, @Paws Up Podcast on all platforms, where you can get all of our FIU coverage. When we're not busy with football, we do drop episodes every Tuesday or Thursday. We recently hit episode 100 and have been going strong. So it's been an awesome year for us so far. Thank you guys. So definitely we'll be dropping content, getting the Delaware faithful ready as well for this game. So it's going to be a lot of fun. And like I said, we hope to see you down here. And if you do, be sure to say hey and pause up, dale. You're going to be hearing a lot of dale, so get ready for that, gentlemen.
Hey, true that. And Bryce, I've got to compliment Jake real quick. I go to Coach Simmons' bio, and the first thing I see is the hot link to the Paws Up podcast episode where Coach Simmons is featured. So that's wonderful. So that's great stuff, and clearly it's a great job you guys are doing. Locked in with the website link and everything. So wonderful stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah, Jake, thanks so much for being here, and I know Dan's heading down there, so looking forward to collaborating in the future, and thanks again for joining us.
It's my pleasure, gentlemen. Best of luck to the Blue Hens. Hopefully after this game, you guys happen to have a great season, because I am a big Joe Flacco fan. So to know that he came from the Fighting Blue Hens is really cool. Unfortunately, even if it's an amazing season for Delaware, NCAA rules can't compete in the CUSA title, but I'm still hoping to see great things from the Blue Hens and how they fare in Conference USA.
Great. Again, thanks so much for your time, Jake.
Thank you guys so much.
Great conversation that Dan and I just had with Jake. Super excited to cover them more, both of us, on the Conference USA Roundtable this week. I really appreciate him joining us over here. I know Dan's going to be representing us over on Paws Up this week, so definitely look out for that one as well. Let's focus back on the Blue Hens here. Brody, what's the one thing you're kind of focusing on, thinking about the Blue Hens heading into their first conference opponent of the year?
I'm really looking at Delaware's rushing defense. Of course, we didn't do that well against the run with UConn. Of course, they ran a lot of outside zone against our defense, which is basically their base offense is outside zone running. So I'm interested to see how FIU's running backs kind of fare against Delaware's defense, which is lighter in the box and sort of heavier on the back end. The rushing defense is going to play a huge part in how this game goes, especially if it rains like it's threatening to do. But I have been impressed by Delaware's ability in the trenches, which is part of kind of what I'm looking at. If you ever want to know what you do well, listen to the opposing team's podcast the week after the game. And a constant thread has been how Delaware has been so strong in the trenches, really playing up to larger offensive linemen, getting pressure, stopping the interior run game. And so those two things will be things I'm looking at kind of going into FIU, who's known for their run game. It'll be interesting to see how that plays a part and if Delaware can stop them.
Dan, I had a hunch you were going to talk about, the Blue Hens stopping the run from a different position outside the running back. So after our talk with Jake, I'll let you take the floor here on what you're looking out for the Blue Hens this Saturday.
Yeah, my one thing among several, but the one I'll highlight that I'm watching is Delaware defending FIU quarterback Kewan Jenkins in terms of being a dual threat. Jenkins is more mobile than the previous quarterback Delaware just opposed. You look at Kewan Jenkins this season, already almost 500 passing yards this year, but in terms of rushing for Jenkins, I'm seeing 3 rushing touchdowns on the campaign, and stats that we'll have gone over with Jake as well. But I think that switching gears from one week to the next, turning the page to FIU and seeing that, you're the defense with the rest of the team hopping off the plane in the humidity, in a new place, just not being drenched with sweat the whole time on the sideline, it can be a challenge. And then when you're actually on the field, getting out there and dealing with Jenkins, who's a really talented player and one who I know got preseason recognition in Conference USA. So I'm especially interested in that because I think Delaware got rewarded for its big breakthroughs, and think about that one huge sack on Fignano we already talked about, and the rewards are going to be that much tougher to get, I think, in terms of creating havoc in the backfield with Jenkins on the other side.
I think that's a good call out. The Blue Hens against a more mobile quarterback. I think we talked about the same thing when Caden Salter, the front that game, 5 sacks, 11 tackles for loss. So hoping you can keep Jenkins from really, making his legs a factor in this next matchup. I'm going to think about the other side of the ball. I'm thinking about the offense after that 44-point, 500-plus yard day. How do they continue this on the road after really an emotional victory? How does it take when you're facing your first conference game of the year? I think I don't think I heard this in the presser after the game, but a 24-hour rule. Get the win. Be excited about it, but the calendar flips. It's short-term memory, getting ready for week 4, and we talked about preparing for the season. There's not an easy opponent on the schedule after the first week of the season, so it's about short preparation. It's about you have the bye week in sight before really starting your midweek schedule here for the Blue Hens. Your last Saturday until November at this point, but. Just think about it from the perspective of, keeping everything in front of you. How is the offense going to respond after, having a really clean operation? As Joe said, in the Colorado game, they just didn't really execute. And when he said they do execute, he just doesn't really know how they're going to be stopped. And I'm curious to see, how they continue it. How does Florida International, prepare on their side to stop it? And I'm just really curious to think ahead for the Hens on the offensive side of the ball as well. Dan, let's think about score predictions. You both stayed strong on the Hens last week. I think I actually said that UConn had that Syracuse game, and that, after, blowing a lead, they had the majority of the game in an overtime scenario. I thought that maybe UConn was a little more prepared, but I didn't factor in just how much, being at home really helped the Hens. So I'll throw it to you to, keep on your I think you're our only 3-0 representative out of the 3 of us right now. So what's your prediction here in week 4?
You shouldn't have said that stat, Bryce, because it definitely made me feel good for a split second. And then I realized this is an unsustainable pace I'm on. So we'll get that out of the way. But yeah, this is a toughie for all the obvious reasons. I was talking with somebody earlier in the week, it's hard to necessarily benchmark FIU and make like a CAA comp or be like, oh, this FIU team is what this team would be in the CAA, like in terms of trying to place yourself relative to FIU, which I know Bryce just did, or excuse me, Brody just did helpfully in the pecking order a little bit. You see Delaware and FIU neck and neck in the pecking order. So this one's hard to gauge, hard to ballpark. Home field, I think, makes a difference. If this thing winds up in some kind of lightning delay, the home team would always benefit from being in the home digs during a delay, so that's an unknown. There's a risk of some emotional letdown, but a lot to prove still because it's that league opener on the road. So that kind of, I think, with the coaching leadership of Delaware and the stakes of being in conference play, that somewhat is set aside. I'm going to go with Delaware again. I'm not willing to pick against Delaware after the team cohesion that was shown last week. The pick-me-up shown by, corresponding sides of the ball and special teams with Vitko snapping, Locke holds, and Reed puts it through to extend the game. I'm not willing to go against that combination overall, that Delaware team effort just yet. It's hard for me to pinpoint exactly how and why yet, but I'm going to go with Delaware. Looking for not quite the same points total on the road. That's going to be much harder to get on the road, I think, in terms of offensive point total. I'm going to go with Delaware getting it done by a score of 28-25. So give me the 3-point margin again. I don't think there's any reason that there should be any more confidence in the field goal margin.
Very similar, I think, on my end here. I have 30-27 Delaware. I think of it from perspective, like you said. Like even Joe said as well before, the offense moved the ball well against Colorado, against really fast, strong defense, and they just couldn't convert. But if they find ways to put away drives like that, I see them maybe getting a 30+ again. I do think on the road, unknown weather, recording on a Tuesday, you'll hear this Thursday. Weather changes a lot, and we won't really know until we have Friday night turning into Saturday on what we're going to be getting on this front. But I just don't have a reason to not believe in this team. On defense, if it does get in a shootout, they're experienced. They find ways to make stops when needed. And I think, Florida International, we talk about us maybe, having emotional letdown potential. Florida International just had a big rivalry win in the Shula Bowl against Florida Atlantic as well, and also have a bye week until they play the UConn Huskies on their schedule. So both teams are at a very similar front right now. Emotional win, beat your FBS opponent week 1, lost to a strong Power 4 program week 2, win against a rival in week 3, a regional rival in week 3, and now week 4, open up their conference slate before heading into week 5 bye. So I'm going to have the Hens 30-27 in this one. I'm sticking with them. I felt on the bad side last week, so I'm flipping my vote this week. Brody, let's throw it over to you for the 2 helmets. I know you have that Florida International helmet ready to go on one side of on your desk.
Awesome. Thank you, Bryce. So as you know, I do a headgear selection. Over here on this side of my desk, I have a Delaware helmet, and over here I have some sort of headgear to represent the opposing university. And this one is hard for me. This one is really tricky because kind of as you mentioned, Bryce, you stole all my talking points I had in my head. The rivalry game that both teams are coming off of, the similar trajectory of the seasons, both teams kind of pose an interesting wrinkle in their offenses to each other that maybe they haven't seen. Of course, the QB power read that Delaware is so good at, and then of course the mobile quarterback that FIU also has, and I truly am tempted to pick FIU in this one because I don't like the home field advantage. I don't like the weather aspect. I know the joke is that they don't have any attendance in their home stadium, but it doesn't really matter in Miami because that's not really what you're going up against. You're really going up against the weather in Miami. But the good thing about this is that I sent out emails before the season started, and they didn't mail me a helmet. They're the only team that didn't mail me a helmet of all the teams in the conference. Even UConn mailed me a helmet. And I'm going to have to pick... I'm going to have to pick Delaware because they gave me no choice. I had to pick them. I'm picking the Hens. I'm picking them to win 31-28. I think it's going to be a relatively high-scoring game, but not as high-scoring as UConn, hopefully. But that's my pick. I'm picking Delaware.
A hen sweep and a hen sweep by 3. I don't know how I feel about that. It could come back to bite us over here, Feathers and Field Goals, but a hen sweep. Looking forward to a Week 4 matchup before the bye week for the Hens. If you made it the whole way through, thanks again for being with us for another episode of Feathers and Field Goals. If you haven't already, please like and subscribe, leave us a review, and we'll catch you for our bye week edition next week.